Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another Breakfast with Blaha, and today we're having Greek yogurt, almond butter, frozen blueberries. Alright, let's talk about leverages on the big three, the squat, bench, and deadlift. Because people love to throw words out though, like that, like leverages. Just like when people say things like stabilizers, right? Stabilizers. This works lots of stabilizers. I don't know what you mean is it uses a lot of stabilizers. It doesn't really work stabilizers. But they leave it as this ambiguous term because they don't know what stabilizers are. They're specific muscles, right? A stabilizer might be a bicep or a hamstring or your abdominals. That's what we mean by stabilizers. They're just not the primary movers, but they have names. So people like to throw out for powerlifting, they'll say, oh, well, powerlifting is not even a test of true strength because it's all about leverages. Okay. And the problem we get into is a lot of other leverages matter more when we're talking about relative strength, not absolute strength. And by relative strength, we mean strength relative to your body weight. That's a really strong guy pound for pound. And we could argue there are other classifications that go into relative strength, age class, sex, things like that. So, leverages. Well, what does that mean? People say that and they don't ever tell you what a leverage is. And I'll tell you specifically what they are. And this is the reason the big three is a good test of strength, is because the perfect leverages for each lift are different. They're different. So this is, again, when someone says, well, you can't use just one lift to compare everyone. I always say, well, you can use a deadlift. And people say, well, maybe you're built to deadlift. Not really. It's not my best leverage lift, actually. Squat is. But if we have multiple lifts to where different people with different structures have an advantage at each one and a disadvantage at another usually, or they're just really balanced, when you combine them together, it is a good test of strength, right? It's a great test of strength to compare individual people and their ability to produce force. Also, when we come to that, a little caveat, again, people will say, well, their muscles might be producing more force or less force, but that person's leverages matter. And so it's still not a test of force production, but it is, because what is strength? Strength is a production of force against an external object, not an internal object. So in other words, you might have a bigger and stronger tricep, and it may not matter because your leverage disadvantage is so bad that it doesn't overcome what someone else can do. But they're still producing more force externally against an object due to their leverages being better than yours, even if you at the tendon level have, say, 3% more tricep strength. All right? They're still going to move more weight because they can produce more force. So let's look at each lift and understand what the best advantage is. And what these things are going to be, it's going to be things like how long your arms, legs, and torso are relative to each other. This is what we mean by leverages. All right, best leverage for the bench press, short arms, okay? Short arms. Hopefully a big stocky chest and rib cage. Now, I've got long arms and a thick rib cage. Bench is actually my worst lift, right? I have long arms. And this is the one that has the least variables involved because, again, it's only using the upper body, whereas in the squat and the deadlift, use the upper and the lower. So if you have short arms, you move the weight a shorter distance. Someone with longer arms moves the weight a longer distance. Now, the other thing is people say, but you can change grip widths to shorten or increase the distance, and that's true. You absolutely can. However, one of the problems we note is that people with longer arms sometimes have more shoulder issues if we try to go too wide. Can exacerbate them quickly. So we're at a double disadvantage, really, because the people with the shorter arms And a good arch can go real wide on the bench without the same sort of inflammation on their shoulder. So they can actually use their arms to even more of an advantage. So again, bench press, the leverages that we look at are arm length. It's the single most important lever. Then following that would be things like rib cage size. What about the squat? Well, arm length doesn't matter on the squat, so we don't have to worry about that. So what are we looking at? Torso, how tall your torso is versus how long your legs are, specifically the femurs. Right, most of your leg length variation is going to come from the femurs. That's the thigh. Muscle between the knee and the hip. All right. The shorter your femur, the shorter the distance you have to squat. And the shorter your femur is, the more you can stay upright. Because what do we do with the bar? The bar has to stay mid-foot. So again, picture this as you squatting, right? This is your knee, your femur. This is your torso. So someone with longer femurs, which again, when they're at the bottom, longer distance to keep the bar mid-foot, their torso is going to have to come forward more and more and more. So if someone has longer femurs, they're going to have to lean forward more and lever their back more coming out of the bottom of a squat. People with shorter femurs can be slightly more upright. So what do we get here? The center of gravity is different. So not only do the shorter your legs get, that reduces the range of motion, it also affects how much back lever you have to use. Now, again, people would say, but a strong back, wouldn't that give you an advantage? Yes, a strong back gives you an advantage. But if you're at a lever disadvantage because of the moment arms, what's going to happen? You're going to need more back strength to even produce the same force, because we come back to levers again. So what are we looking for perfect squat levers? Short femurs, long torso. That would be me, by the way. That's where I am. Why I'm strong at the squat. The squat is my best lift in terms of relative strength, right? It's my best lift. And keeping in mind, I took a year and a half off from squatting a few years ago. And my squat still becomes my strongest lift. It's leverage, it's genetics. What happens when someone has longer femurs? Well, they move the weight a longer distance. And if we're looking at relative segment lengths, long femurs with a shorter torso relative to their femur length means they're really going to have a more aggressive back angle, right? Because again, keeping that bar mid-foot, that torso length matters. They're going to have to, again, lean forward even more. If they have a shorter torso, again, keeping that bar over the middle of their foot. So if you look at the angles that it puts the low back and everything at, a long torso is good for squats. A short femur is good for squats. And when they go the opposite direction, it makes squats harder and harder. This is one reason a lot of really tall guys, because again, they tend to have longer ratios of femur versus torso. That's why a lot of really tall guys suck at squats. And they might still have elite squats. I'm not saying there aren't really tall guys who squat 700 or 800 pounds. There aren't as many as there are shorter guys due to shorter legs. Not even close. And they don't break world records. Deadlift. We deal with all three. Leg length, torso length, arm length. On the deadlift, what's ideal? Short torso, which would mean longer legs, again in the ratios, long arms. Okay, long arms. So why? Why does that matter? Because the longer legs mean you have a shorter torso. This means you move the weight a shorter distance. Longer arms, you move the weight a shorter distance. The arm length is a really big one. So why do we want the shorter torso? Well, it has to do with how much back versus hamstring you use. Taller guys who, again, have a torso that's short relative to their femur length, they don't have to leverage the bar as far. They tend to have more hamstring muscle due to a longer leg. The hamstring is usually then bigger, even in terms of relative to diameter. They can get more hamstring power because they tend to have more total hamstring force, and they have a shorter moment arm on the torso. They have leverage advantage there, and then if they have longer arms, which again tends to go hand in hand with longer femurs, I'm the odd man out there, I'm reversed, they're better at the deadlift. Guys with short arms and with long torsos are at an enormous disadvantage on the deadlift. An enormous disadvantage. And if people want to see closer what I'm talking about, go look at all the world record holders in a variety of weight classes in all three of these lifts, and they tend to all fall towards the builds I just described. And people say, well, what about someone who's balanced? Well, that would be someone like John Hack, who's just a genetic freak. He is just elite at everything. He's elite at everything. All right? Ben Pollack might be, again, another good example, who's maybe not as freakish genetics. Right? They're just balanced. They're balanced, and then they have good genes in other areas to make them strong. So not everyone fits one of these categories because some people have balanced ratios, in which case they have no real advantage or disadvantage on lifts. They just tend to be all around good. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.